Have you ever made a decision so painful that it felt like your heart was being ripped from your chest, yet you knew it was the only right thing to do? Have you ever held a secret so heavy that it shaped every single day of your life for 5 long years? Well, let me tell you about the day I walked back into the life of the man I loved more than anything, carrying our 4-year-old daughter in my arms, knowing that within weeks I would be gone forever. This is my story, and I need you to understand that every choice I made, every lie I told, every tear I cried in the darkness of countless lonely nights was born from a love so profound and so impossible that it consumed everything I was. My name used to be Sarah Mitchell, though I changed it to Sarah Chen when I ran. And the day I'm about to tell you about changed everything, not just for me, but for my daughter Emma, and for Alexander Hartwell, the billionaire tech mogul who never knew he had a child until the moment I appeared at his office building with a dying wish and a truth that would shatter his carefully constructed world. It was a cold November morning when I made that walk, my hands trembling as I held Emma's small fingers in mine, her innocent brown eyes, so much like his, looking up at me with complete trust, completely unaware that I was leading her toward a father she had never met and a future I would never see. The cancer had spread faster than the doctors predicted, stage 4 pancreatic cancer with metastases to my liver and lungs, and I had maybe 6 weeks left. 8 if I was incredibly lucky, and the new treatment protocol worked miracles that statistically almost never happened. I had spent 3 weeks wrestling with this decision, lying awake in my small apartment in Portland, listening to Emma's peaceful breathing in the room next to mine, wondering if I had any right to disrupt his life, to drop this bomb into his world. But ultimately, what choice did I have? Emma deserved to know her father, deserved to have family when I was gone, deserved more than the foster care system or my elderly parents who were already struggling with their own health issues and couldn't possibly raise an energetic 4-year-old girl who asked a million questions and needed so much love and attention and care that I knew they couldn't provide at their age. The Hartwell Industries building loomed above me like a glass and steel monument to everything I had run from 5 years ago. 67 floors of power and money, and a world I never belonged to. And as Emma and I stepped through those revolving doors into the marble lobby with its towering ceilings and modern art installations that probably cost more than I would earn in 10 lifetimes, I felt like I was walking into a dream. Or maybe a nightmare. I couldn't quite tell which. Security stopped us immediately. Of course they did. I looked like exactly what I was. A woman in a worn coat from a thrift store with a small child whose shoes were getting too tight because I had been saving money for her future instead of buying new ones. And I didn't have an appointment. Didn't have any credentials, didn't have anything except a 4-year-old girl who had his eyes and his smile and DNA that would prove everything I was about to claim. The security guard, a large man with kind eyes who probably had children of his own, looked at me with that mixture of suspicion and sympathy that I had become so familiar with over the past months, and I told him, my voice shaking but firm, that I needed to see Alexander Hartwell, that it was urgent, that it was personal, and that he would want to see me even though he didn't know it yet. I expected to be turned away. Honestly, I did. I expected to have to find another way. Maybe through his assistant, maybe through some lawyer. Maybe I would have to leave a letter and hope it found its way to him through the layers and layers of people whose job it was to keep people exactly like me away from men exactly like him. But something in my face, something in Emma's innocent smile as she waved at the security guard, something in the desperate truth that must have been written all over me made him pick up his phone, and I heard him speaking to someone, explaining that there was a woman here with a child who insisted it was urgent, who seemed genuine, who seemed like maybe this wasn't just another person trying to get money or attention or whatever it is people usually want from billionaires. Minutes passed like hours as Emma and I sat in those uncomfortable modern chairs in the lobby, her swinging her legs and asking me if we were going to see the nice man I had told her about, if he would like her, if he had toys in his office. Such innocent questions that made my heart break into smaller and smaller pieces because she had no idea, no concept of what was about to happen, no understanding that I was about to change her entire life in ways she couldn't possibly comprehend at 4 years old. Then he appeared, and time seemed to stop completely. My breath caught in my throat. My heart hammered against my ribs so hard I thought it might burst through my chest. And there he was, Alexander Hartwell, looking exactly as I remembered, but somehow more polished, more powerful, more untouchable. In his perfectly tailored charcoal suit that probably cost more than my car, his dark hair just slightly longer than he used to wear it, those piercing blue eyes that had once looked at me with such warmth and desire now scanning the lobby with confusion and impatience until they landed on me. I watched recognition flicker across his face, watched surprise, then shock, then something that might have been anger or hurt or confusion. I couldn't quite read it. And then his eyes moved to Emma, and I saw it. I saw the exact moment when he noticed her eyes, her face, the features that were undeniably his, and his expression changed into something I had never seen before. Something raw and unguarded that made him look almost vulnerable despite all his power and money and control. He walked toward us like a man in a trance, his usually confident stride becoming uncertain, and I stood up, pulling Emma up with me, my daughter who was about to meet her father for the first time, my daughter who I was about to entrust to a man I had run from 5 years ago, because I was too afraid, too overwhelmed, too convinced that I could never fit into his world, and that my love would only become a burden he would eventually resent. The first words out of his mouth were not what I expected. They were quiet, almost whispered, disbelieving, and he said my name like a question, like he wasn't sure I was real, like maybe I was a ghost or a hallucination or some cruel trick his mind was playing on him. "Sarah," he said, and then his eyes went back to Emma, and he didn't have to ask. I could see he already knew. Some instinct or maybe just the undeniable resemblance telling him everything before I said a single word. I opened my mouth to speak, to explain, to tell him everything right there in the lobby with security watching and people walking past, and my daughter standing between us like a living, breathing bridge between two worlds that should never have collided. But he held up his hand, his jaw tight, and said, we needed to go somewhere private, somewhere we could talk. And he led us to a private elevator that required a key card, and we rode up in silence so thick and heavy that I felt like I was drowning in it. Emma, the only one talking, asking questions about the tall building and the fast elevator and why the nice man looked so serious, her innocent voice cutting through the tension like a knife. His office was on the 67th floor, a massive space with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, minimalist furniture that screamed expensive taste, photos on his desk that I tried not to look at too closely because I didn't want to know if he had moved on, if he had someone else, if my reappearance was about to complicate more than just his life, but someone else's too. He asked his assistant to hold all calls, to cancel his meetings, his voice tight and controlled, and then we were alone, just the three of us. And Emma immediately went to the windows, pressing her small hands against the glass and exclaiming about how tiny the cars looked below, completely oblivious to the massive emotional bomb that was about to explode in this room. Alexander stood there several feet away from me, his hands clenched at his sides, and the first thing he said was, not what is she doing here, or why did you leave, or even how dare you. What he said was, is she mine? And his voice cracked on that last word, cracked in a way that told me this strong, powerful man was barely holding himself together, that underneath all that control was an ocean of emotion threatening to break free. Yes, I said, and my voice was barely a whisper. She's yours. Her name is Emma, she's 4 years old, and she's the most incredible, smart, funny, loving child you could ever imagine. And I'm sorry. I'm so incredibly sorry that I kept her from you, that you missed her first smile, her first word, her first steps, her first day of preschool, all those moments that can never be replaced or recreated. But I need you to understand why I left, why I ran, why I convinced myself it was the right thing to do, even though it was the hardest thing I've ever done, and not a single day has passed that I haven't questioned that decision. He just stared at me, his face cycling through expressions so quickly I could barely track them. Shock, anger, confusion, hurt, wonder, and then he looked at Emma again, really looked at her, and I saw his eyes fill with tears, this powerful billionaire who commanded boardrooms and made million-dollar decisions without blinking was crying. And he said, she has my mother's smile, my mother who died when I was 12. And I knew from that one statement that he believed me, that he saw it, that some part of him recognized his daughter even though they had never met. Emma turned around then, sensing something in the room had changed, and she walked over to us, her small hand reaching for mine, and she looked up at Alexander with those big brown eyes that were so much like his and said, are you my daddy? And the question was so direct, so innocent, so full of hope and trust that I felt my carefully constructed composure start to crumble. I had told her we were going to meet someone special, someone important, but I hadn't used the word daddy because I wasn't sure how this would go. Wasn't sure if he would accept her, want her, believe me. But children have an instinct about these things. They understand connections that adults try to complicate with logic and fear and past hurt. Alexander looked at me with a question in his eyes, asking permission almost, and I nodded, Because what else could I do? This was why I had come. This was the moment I had been dreading and hoping for in equal measure. He knelt down, getting on Emma's level, and said, "Yes, I think I am." And Emma smiled, that brilliant, trusting smile that could light up the darkest room, and said, "I'm Emma Rose, and I'm 4.5. Not just 4. The half is very important, and I like dinosaurs and painting, and my mommy makes the best pancakes in the whole world." I watched this first interaction between father and daughter with tears streaming down my face that I couldn't control anymore. Tears for all the lost time. Tears for what I was about to tell him. Tears for the future Emma would have without me, but hopefully with him. Tears for the love I had never stopped feeling for this man, even though I had convinced myself that leaving was right, that he deserved someone better, someone who fit into his world, someone who wouldn't be intimidated by his wealth and power and the responsibilities that came with being Alexander Hartwell's partner. He talked to Emma for several minutes, asking her about her favorite things, about her friends, about what she liked to do, and she answered with that complete openness that children have before the world teaches them to be guarded and careful. And I could see him falling in love with her in real time. Could see this man who I knew to be brilliant and strategic and always in control being completely undone by a 4-year-old girl who shared his DNA, and apparently his stubborn streak because when he suggested she might want to look at some toys his assistant could bring, she said she would rather stay with Mommy and her new daddy and make sure they were okay, because Mommy had been sad lately, and she wanted to make sure the nice man wasn't making Mommy cry. Alexander's eyes met mine over Emma's head, and the question in them was clear. Why was Mommy sad? Why are you here? Why now? After 5 years of complete silence. After leaving without a word. After disappearing so thoroughly that even with all his resources he apparently couldn't find me, though I didn't know at the time that he had looked, had hired investigators, had spent months trying to track me down before finally accepting that I didn't want to be found. I asked Emma if she would like to draw some pictures, pulling out the coloring book and crayons I had brought in my bag, always prepared because that's what mothers do. We anticipate needs and carry solutions, and she settled happily at a small table near his desk, and Alexander and I moved to the other side of his office, far enough that she couldn't hear but close enough that I could see her, because I never let her out of my sight anymore. Every moment was precious. Every second counted. "Now tell me," he said, and his voice was low and intense and barely controlled. "Tell me everything. Tell me why you left, why you kept my daughter from me, why you show up now after all this time, and I need to know if this is about money, because if it is, just tell me. Name your price. But don't use that little girl over there as a pawn in whatever game you're playing." His words stung, but I understood them. Understood why he would think that. Why anyone in his position would assume the worst. Would think that a woman from his past showing up with a child claiming to be his was just another person trying to take advantage, trying to get a piece of the fortune, trying to trap him with paternity claims and demands. "It's not about money," I said, my voice steady despite the tears still falling. "I don't want anything from you. Not for me anyway. And I'm not here to trap you or make demands or ruin your life. I'm here because I'm dying, Alexander. I have stage 4 pancreatic cancer. I have maybe 6 weeks left, 2 months if I'm lucky. And I need to know that Emma will be taken care of, that she'll have family, that she won't end up in the system or with my parents who are too old and sick to raise her. And I need her to know her father before I'm gone. I need to see that she'll be okay. And then I can die in peace knowing I did the one right thing in all of this mess I've made." The color drained from his face. His mouth opened but no words came out. And he just stared at me like I had spoken in a foreign language, like his brain couldn't process what I had just said, couldn't compute that the woman standing in front of him, who looked thin and tired but still alive, still breathing, still talking, was dying, would be gone in weeks, would leave our daughter an orphan if he didn't step up. He stumbled backward, reaching for his desk to steady himself, and for a moment I thought he might collapse. This strong man who faced corporate raiders and hostile takeovers and billion-dollar risks without flinching was completely undone by the truth I had just revealed. "You're lying," he said. But there was no conviction in his voice, just desperate hope that I was making this up, that this was some elaborate scheme, that I wasn't actually dying, and I pulled out the folder from my bag, the one with medical records and doctor's notes and test results and prognosis reports, and I handed it to him, and I watched him read through them, watched his hands shake, watched him have to sit down in his expensive leather chair because his legs wouldn't hold him anymore. "How long have you known?" he asked, his voice barely audible, and I told him, 3 months since diagnosis, but I'd been feeling sick for longer, had ignored the symptoms because I was busy working 2 jobs and taking care of Emma, and I didn't have good insurance, and I told myself it was just stress, just exhaustion, just the normal tiredness of being a single parent, until I collapsed at work, and they rushed me to the ER and ran tests and found the tumor, found that it had already spread, found that I had waited too long, that even if I'd had all the money in the world and access to the best doctors and experimental treatments, my prognosis was poor, a 5% 5-year survival rate, and that was being optimistic. He looked at Emma, who was happily coloring, completely unaware that we were discussing her entire future, completely innocent in her belief that Mommy would always be there, and he said, "She doesn't know." And I shook my head. "No, I haven't told her. How do you tell a 4-year-old that her mother is dying, that soon she'll wake up and I won't be there anymore, that everything she knows and trusts and relies on is about to disappear? I can't do it. I don't know how, and that's why I need you. Why I came here. Why I'm asking you to be her father, not just in biology but in every way that matters." "Have you thought about what you're asking?" he said, and there was anger creeping into his voice now, the shock wearing off and being replaced by fury. "You disappeared 5 years ago without a word, without an explanation. You were just gone. And I looked for you, Sarah. I looked everywhere. I hired the best investigators. I called your friends, your family. Everyone told me you wanted to be left alone, that you had made your choice, and I finally accepted that you didn't want me, that whatever we had wasn't enough for you, and I moved on, or I tried to, and now you show up with a daughter I never knew existed, with weeks to live, and you expect me to just step into being a father, like it's that simple, like I can just flip a switch and know how to raise a child, like she won't be traumatized by losing the only parent she's ever known, and then being handed over to a stranger who happens to share her DNA. Everything he said was true. Every accusation was justified. And I had no defense except the truth, except the messy, complicated reality of why I left. And I knew I owed him that. Owed him the full story. Not the simplified version I had told myself for 5 years to make the leaving easier, but the real, raw truth about fear and insecurity and love that felt too big and too impossible to sustain. "I left because I was terrified," I said, the words tumbling out now, 5 years of silence breaking open like a dam. "I left because I was 23 years old and you were Alexander Hartwell, billionaire genius, and I was a barista with student loans and a degree in English literature that qualified me for nothing. And we had this incredible whirlwind romance that felt like a fairy tale, but I knew deep down that it couldn't last, that eventually you would wake up and realize you could have any woman who actually fit into your world, who knew which fork to use at those fancy dinners, who could talk about stocks and portfolios and whatever else people in your world talk about, and I would just be this embarrassing mistake, this phase you went through, and I couldn't bear it. Couldn't bear the thought of watching your feelings fade, of seeing disappointment in your eyes, of becoming an obligation instead of a choice." He opened his mouth to interrupt, but I held up my hand because I needed to finish, needed to get it all out, and I continued. "And then I found out I was pregnant, and I was terrified, absolutely terrified, because I barely knew how to take care of myself, let alone a baby, and I knew what would happen. You would do the right thing because that's who you are. You would marry me out of obligation, would support us financially, would play the role of husband and father, because that's what's expected. But I would always know that I trapped you, that you stayed because of duty, not love, and I couldn't live with that, couldn't live knowing I derailed your entire life. So I left. I changed my name. I moved across the country. I built a life for Emma and me. And yes, it was hard. Yes, I struggled. Yes, there were nights I cried myself to sleep, wondering if I made the right choice. But she was happy, Alexander. She is happy. And I gave her all the love I had, and I thought that was enough. I thought I could do this alone. But you can't do it alone anymore, he said quietly, the anger draining from his voice, replaced by something softer, sadder, and I nodded. "No, I can't. Death doesn't care about my pride or my independence or my determination to prove I could handle everything myself. Death doesn't negotiate or give extensions or care that my daughter still needs me. And so I had to swallow my pride and my fear and come here and admit that I was wrong, that I should have told you from the beginning, that Emma deserved to know her father, and you deserve to know your daughter. And now I'm here begging you to take her, to love her, to give her the life she deserves even though I won't be here to see it." The room fell silent except for Emma's humming as she colored, a cheerful tune that contrasted sharply with the heavy emotional weight filling the space between Alexander and me, and I watched him struggling with everything I had just dumped on him. Saw him looking at Emma with a mixture of love and terror and overwhelming responsibility, and I wondered if I had just made everything worse, if I should have made different arrangements, if throwing him into instant fatherhood while grieving my impending death was cruel and unfair and more than anyone should have to handle. But then he stood up, walked over to where Emma was coloring, and knelt down beside her, asking her about her drawing, and she showed him a picture of 3 people, a mommy, a daddy, and a little girl holding hands, and she said, "This is us. This is our family." And I watched this powerful man who controlled a business empire look at that crayon drawing like it was the most precious thing in the world, and I knew he would do it. He would step up. He would be the father Emma needed, even if it meant his whole life was about to change in ways he never anticipated. The weeks that followed that initial meeting were a blur of arrangements and introductions and trying to build a relationship between father and daughter while I still could, while I was still strong enough to facilitate their bonding, while I could still answer Emma's questions and help Alexander understand her routines and preferences and the 1,000 little things that make up a child's daily life. We did DNA testing, of course, not because either of us really doubted, but because it would make legal arrangements easier. And when the results came back confirming what we already knew with 99.99% certainty, Alexander hired the best family lawyers money could buy to establish paternity, set up custody arrangements, and ensure that everything was legally airtight so there would be no complications after I was gone. We met almost every day, sometimes at his penthouse, sometimes at my small apartment, and I watched Emma and Alexander slowly find their rhythm, watched her initial shyness give way to comfort, watched him go from terrified and uncertain to confident and loving, watched him learn how to braid her hair, even though his first attempts were disasters that made Emma giggle, watched him figure out that she needed exactly 3 bedtime stories and a nightlight shaped like a star and her stuffed elephant Mr. Snuggles who had been with her since birth and couldn't sleep without. He asked me questions constantly, filling multiple notebooks with information. What did Emma like to eat? What made her laugh? What scared her? How did I handle tantrums? What were her favorite books, her favorite songs? Did she have any allergies? Any health issues I hadn't mentioned? What did I do when she had nightmares? How did I explain difficult things to her? What were my parenting philosophies? And I answered everything as completely as I could, trying to download 4 years of motherhood into a few short weeks, knowing it wasn't enough, knowing that so much of parenting is learned through experience and mistakes and trial and error, but hoping that at least I could give him a foundation, a starting point, a map for the journey he was about to take alone. I also told him about me, about who I was beyond being Emma's mother, because I wanted him to understand the person I had become in those 5 years we were apart, wanted him to know that I had grown and changed and built a life that maybe wasn't glamorous but was mine, that I had worked hard and made friends and found joy in small things like Emma's laughter and Sunday morning pancakes and walks in the park, that leaving him had been about my insecurities, not his failings, and that I had never stopped loving him even though I had convinced myself that love wasn't enough to bridge the gap between our worlds. One night, about 3 weeks after that first meeting, after Emma had fallen asleep in Alexander's guest room that he had transformed into a princess paradise with pink walls and a canopy bed and more toys than any child needed, we sat together on his couch, and he asked me the question I had been dreading. What do you want me to tell her about you? How do I keep your memory alive? How do I make sure she knows how much you loved her? And I broke down completely, sobbing in a way I hadn't let myself do since the diagnosis because I had to stay strong for Emma, had to keep it together. But in that moment, I couldn't anymore. Couldn't pretend that I was okay with dying, with leaving my baby, with missing all her future milestones, her first day of kindergarten, learning to ride a bike, her first lost tooth, school plays, birthday parties, teaching her about boys and heartbreak and how to be strong and kind and brave in a world that isn't always gentle with women, walking her down the aisle someday, meeting my grandchildren, all of it gone. All of it stolen by cancer cells that didn't care about dreams or hopes or how desperately I wanted to stay. Alexander held me while I cried, and I felt his tears, too, mixing with mine, and he said, "I'm so angry at you, Sarah. I'm so angry that you kept her from me, that you robbed me of 4 years I can never get back, but I also understand why you did it, and I forgive you, and I promise you, I swear to you on everything I have, that I will love her and protect her and make sure she knows every single day how much her mother loved her. How you sacrificed everything for her. How You were the best mother she could have asked for. Do you have someone, I asked him later that night, after my tears had finally stopped, someone in your life who this will complicate? Because if you do, I need to know. I need to make sure Emma won't be unwelcome or resented. And he shook his head. No, there's no one serious. There hasn't been anyone serious since you. A few dates here and there to keep up appearances, to stop my mother's friends from trying to set me up, but nothing real. Nothing that mattered, because apparently I'm still hung up on the woman who disappeared 5 years ago and just reappeared with my daughter and a death sentence. The words were said with a bitter smile, but I heard the truth in them. Heard that maybe I wasn't the only one who had never really moved on. And I didn't know if that made things better or worse. Didn't know if it was cruel that we had found our way back to each other only for death to separate us again. Didn't know if the universe was playing some cosmic joke or if there was meaning in this suffering that I was too close to see. I wanted to tell him that I loved him, that I had never stopped, that leaving him was the biggest mistake of my life, and if I had it to do over, I would choose differently. Would choose him and risk the heartbreak rather than spend 5 years alone and wondering what if. But I didn't say it because what was the point? What would it change except to add more pain to an already unbearable situation? So I just said thank you. Thank you for being who you are. Thank you for stepping up for Emma. Thank you for not turning us away. Thank you for giving me peace in these final weeks. The decline came faster than anyone expected. The doctors had said 6 to 8 weeks, but by week 4 I was in the hospital more than I was out. My body shutting down system by system. The pain managed by drugs that made me foggy and disconnected. And I hated it. Hated that my last weeks with Emma were spent in sterile hospital rooms smelling of antiseptic instead of at home in the small apartment filled with her drawings and toys and laughter. Hated that she had to see me like this, weak and yellow-skinned from jaundice and unable to hold her for long because my bones hurt too much. Alexander brought her every day, staying as long as the nurses would allow, and I watched them together through my pain medication haze, watched how natural they had become with each other, how she now called him Daddy without hesitation, how she would climb into his lap and tell him about her day, how he had learned to speak her language, to understand her moods, to comfort her fears, and I was grateful, so incredibly grateful that she wouldn't be alone, that she would have him. But telling her was the hardest thing I've ever done. Sitting her down one afternoon when I had managed to refuse the heavy pain medication so I could be clear-headed, and explaining in the simplest terms I could that Mommy was very sick, that the doctors couldn't make me better, that soon I would have to go to sleep and I wouldn't wake up again, but that she would be with Daddy, and he would take care of her and love her just like I did. She didn't understand at first, asking when I would wake up, if it would be tomorrow or next week, and I had to explain again, had to watch comprehension dawn in her beautiful eyes, had to see her face crumble as she understood that I was leaving her, and her screams of no, no, Mommy, don't go, you can't leave me, I need you, broke something in me that was already shattered, broke Alexander too, who was standing beside us with tears streaming down his face as he tried to comfort our daughter, who was facing her first real loss, her first encounter with the permanent nature of death. I held her as tightly as my weakening body would allow, whispering that I loved her, that I would always love her, that even though she couldn't see me, I would always be watching over her, that she was the best thing that ever happened to me, that being her mother was my greatest joy and honor, and I made her promise me that she would be brave, that she would let Daddy love her, that she would live a big, full, happy life, and she promised through her tears, not understanding what she was promising but trusting me like she always had. I died 3 days later in the early morning hours, with Alexander holding one hand and my parents holding the other. Emma asleep at Alexander's penthouse with a babysitter because I didn't want her last memory of me to be watching me die. I wanted her last memory to be of me smiling, telling her I loved her, kissing her forehead, even though I was barely conscious by then, and probably she won't remember it anyway. My last thoughts were of her, of course they were, wondering if she would be okay, if Alexander would keep his promises, if she would grow up knowing how desperately she was loved, if she would forgive me someday for leaving, for keeping her from her father those first 4 years, for all my mistakes and fears and the ways I failed her even as I tried so hard to do everything right. And I thought of Alexander too, of the love we had that I was too afraid to trust, of the life we might have had if I had been braver, if I had believed that love could be enough, if I had given him the chance to prove that my fears were wrong. And I hoped with my last conscious thoughts that he would find happiness again someday, that he wouldn't let my death and the burden of sudden fatherhood embitter him, that he would open his heart to love again when he was ready, because he deserved that, deserved to be happy, deserved someone who wouldn't run away out of fear. But this isn't where the story ends. And I know you're probably confused about how I'm telling you this story if I died. And that's the part I haven't explained yet. The part that changes everything I just told you. See, I didn't die that morning, even though everyone thought I would, even though the doctors had said it was a matter of hours, even though I had said my goodbyes and made my peace and let go. Something happened, something the doctors call a miracle and I call grace or maybe just blind luck. But a new treatment protocol had just been approved, an experimental combination therapy that wasn't even available when I was first diagnosed. And Alexander, who had been working his connections, calling in every favor, contacting every cancer researcher and specialist in the world, had gotten me into the trial. And that morning, when everyone thought I was dying, I was actually starting the treatment that would save my life. It didn't work immediately, of course. It took months of the most brutal therapy imaginable. Months where I was sicker from the treatment than I had been from the cancer. Months where I still thought I might die, where the outcome was uncertain and the side effects were devastating. But slowly, gradually, miraculously, the tumors started shrinking. My test results started improving. My body started fighting back. And here I am, 2 years later, in remission, alive, with Emma, who is now 6, and a half, not just 6. The half is very important, as she loves to remind everyone. Alexander and I aren't together. Not in the romantic sense, though that's complicated too. We co-parent Emma, we've become friends again, or maybe we're becoming something more. We're taking it slow because there's a lot of history and hurt to work through, a lot of conversations we still need to have, a lot of trust that needs to be rebuilt. He forgave me for leaving, for keeping Emma from him. But forgiveness doesn't erase the past, doesn't undo the lost time, doesn't make the hurt disappear. So we're navigating this new relationship carefully, honestly, with Emma's well-being always at the center of every decision we make. She's thriving, by the way, our daughter. She's smart and funny and kind and brave. She loves both her parents fiercely, and she doesn't remember much about those dark months when I was dying, which I'm grateful for. I want her childhood memories to be filled with joy and laughter and love, not hospital rooms and tears and fear. She knows I was very sick, knows that Daddy stepped in to take care of her, knows that we're a family now even if it looks different than some other families, and she's okay with that. Because kids are resilient and adaptive, and as long as they're loved, they can handle complexity that would break adults. I'm telling you this story not because I want sympathy or praise or to convince you that I made all the right choices, because I didn't. I made a lot of wrong choices. I let fear guide me when I should have chosen courage. I kept secrets when I should have been honest. I ran when I should have stayed and fought for the relationship I wanted. But I'm telling you this because I want you to understand that life is complicated, that love is messy and scary, and sometimes we sabotage the very things we want most because we're convinced we don't deserve them or they can't last. And that second chances are rare and precious and not everyone gets one. I got mine. I got to live. I got to watch my daughter grow. I got another chance with the man I loved, and I'm not wasting it. I'm showing up every day with honesty and vulnerability and a commitment to do better, to be better, to build something real instead of running away when things get hard or scary or uncertain. So if you're watching this and you're facing an impossible decision, if you're letting fear make your choices, if you're running from something because you're convinced you're not good enough, or it can't work, or you'll inevitably get hurt, I want you to think about my story. Think about what I almost lost. Think about the years Emma and Alexander and I could have had together if I had been braver. And then I want you to take a risk, to choose courage over fear, to fight for what you want even if it terrifies you, because the regret of not trying is so much worse than the pain of trying and failing. Life is short, so painfully short, and we don't always get second chances. We don't always get miraculous recoveries and opportunities to make things right. So when you have the chance to love someone, to build something real, to be vulnerable and honest and brave, take it. Take it with both hands and don't let go, because that's what matters in the end. Not money or success or looking perfect or fitting in, but love, connection, showing up for the people who matter, being there even when it's hard, choosing each other again and again and again. Have you ever been through something similar? Have you ever let fear make your decisions? Have you ever gotten a second chance you didn't expect? I want to hear your story. Comment below and tell me about the times you were brave or the times you weren't, about your regrets and your triumphs, about the choices that changed your life for better or worse. And if this story touched your heart, if it made you think about your own life and choices differently, If it reminded you that every day is precious and love is worth the risk, please leave a like below because it helps this channel reach more people who might need to hear this message. I share these stories, these deeply personal experiences, because I believe we heal through connection, through knowing we're not alone in our struggles and fears and complicated, messy lives, and every like, every comment, every subscription tells me that these stories matter, that vulnerability creates community, that sharing our truths, even the painful ones, helps us all feel a little less alone in this world. If you want to hear more stories like this, real stories about real people facing impossible choices and finding courage and love and second chances in unexpected places, please subscribe to Through My Eyes and hit that notification bell so you never miss a new story because I post every week, and each story is different, but they all share this common thread of human resilience, of people who faced darkness and found light, who made mistakes and found forgiveness, who were broken and found healing. We're building a community here, a space where it's okay to be imperfect and struggling and still figuring things out, where vulnerability is strength and honesty is valued and everyone's story matters. So join us, be part of this journey, and let's navigate this complicated, beautiful, messy thing called life together. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for being here. Thank you for caring enough to watch all the way to the end. And remember, you are braver than you know, stronger than you think, and deserving of all the love and happiness and second chances this life has to offer. So go out there and claim them, fight for them. Don't let fear win, because you only get one life and it's too precious to spend it running from the things that matter most.